Thank you so much for that way too long of an introduction. I'm sorry. You know, the old joke is that you can always tell a Harvard man, right? But you can't tell him much. Maybe that's not as funny as I thought it was, right? But do you know how you know if someone went to Harvard, right? Do you know the old joke? They'll tell you, exactly. It's kind of like the guys that are doing CrossFit. How do you know somebody goes to CrossFit? They'll tell you, right? How do you know somebody went to Oxford? Their butler will tell you, okay? How do you know somebody is at SUU? They're not going to tell you anything. They're just going to get stuff done. And that's what you do. Congratulations to this team right here. Those Ivy Leaguers need to be knocked off their pedestal from time to time, don't they? Good job, team. That's fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Chair Christensen. Dean Pearson, you're here. Thank you for hosting me. And Professor Stillman, thank you very, very, very much. We're grateful to be here. And all of you, just so happy to be here. I'm going to grab this clicker really quick. I might have left it's someplace. Oh, Ryan, I gave you a clicker. We'll just get right into it, okay? So I want to talk to you a little bit about you being the best. You are the best at so many things that you do. You're here at a wonderful university. Southern Utah University is a fantastic place to get an education. You've qualified to come. You've qualified to be part of this program. So you're the best at what you do in so many different ways. But I want to remind you that you're the best until you're not. Okay, we're going to talk about this a little bit. What do I mean when I say that you're the best until you're not? Let me give you two examples, some case studies, if you will, about this individual who I knew of. So, you know, it was mentioned that I keep an office on Wall Street. I'm headed there today, back and forth about every other week. And this guy is legendary right here. Launched his firm in 1960, and for 5 decades was one of the best in his field, okay? Put together all kinds of different strategies, was an alumnus of a wonderful university there in New York, Hofstra University. It's where they hold the presidential debate, so very well-known university there. Built this great career. Anybody know this building and what it's called? This is the Lipstick Building. It's on 3rd Avenue there. You can see it's kind of shaped like a little, tin of lipstick there. But 40 years later, he has billions under management, tens of billions actually. He pioneers what's called the split strike conversion. He becomes the chair of one of the exchanges there. And he's handling almost 10% of all the trades that are done, publicly traded. Big deal. However, you can see in this last part of the slide that his track record reads as though he is doing, if someone were playing baseball and they had a .925 batting average, what would that say about them? What's a batting average that would get you into the Hall of Fame? 300. Yeah, 300 would get you into the Hall of Fame. So he's 3 times better than a Hall of Famer. What do you think that says? People start asking questions. He doesn't go down in these down cycles. He continues. He's either brilliant or something else is up. Who is this person? Okay. In 2007, Lawrence has $83 billion of assets under management. Okay. One of the best at his craft, the best at what he does on a daily basis. But just 1 year later, the guy's out of business. Why? This man right here that you see is this man. Who knows who that is? This is Bernie Madoff, the architect of the largest Ponzi scheme that ever took place, losing $65 billion to his clients. He had a 150-year prison sentence that he won't live to serve, no chance for parole, multiple suicides from those that worked for him. In fact, his 2 sons, only had 2 sons, one committed suicide, and one passed away from cancer through this process. Terrible story, countless careers ruined and lives that followed. This was Bernie Madoff. He was the best until he was not, okay? Another one right here. This is a little closer to home here at SUU. In Cedar City, just south, there's Las Vegas. Anybody know who these men are right there? Right here is Frank Sinatra, the famous singer, right? So, they talk about in Las Vegas shaking Sinatra's hand. Okay, those were the kinds of guys that were kind of the old gangsters of Las Vegas. The man on the left is Steve Wynn. Now, I have to tell you this. I'm not here to tell you about casinos or my personal feeling about casinos, but this was a man that I admired. Why? Because he built these great hotels, okay? that you'll see right there. Anybody recognize these hotels? The Wynn Hotel, of course, his Encore Hotel. He did that in both Las Vegas and then Macau in China. Okay, so he builds these, but before he does that, he was this great student at University of Pennsylvania. So he's an Ivy League student. He gets into law school at Yale. Sad part of the story is that his father passed away, and his father at that time, so you can imagine, in the 60s, left his family with over $300,000 of gambling debts. So he got to sort of leave Yale University. Instead of going to law school, he went back to work and starts working on paying off this debt for his family. In the process, learns a little bit about running casinos and hotels. And this is the career path that he follows. Now, I want you to know, I admired him so much for what he did in building these beautiful buildings. And if you've been inside them, they were revolutionary in a lot of ways. And he revolutionized what Las Vegas has become, from sort of that seedy, as I write there, to the ultra luxury that you can enjoy for those that go to Las Vegas. I won't tell you how I feel about gambling. I will. I'm not a fan of that. I gamble every day in my profession, but don't gamble this way. But I really liked what his hotel was about. He puts his name, great big letters out on the building. And when we were starting our firm, Clarke Capital, thought, well, what do we name it? And it became. I was there on a trip. I was there at a conference, and when we got out of the car, I went to pick up my bag, and the bellman said, no, don't pick that up. Mr. Wynn would not let you pick up your own bag. I go to open up my own door. Oh, no, Mr. Wynn wouldn't let me do that. I mean, does he know Mr. Wynn? I don't think he knows Mr. Wynn, but he knows what the culture in that organization was. So I really admired that. I thought that was a great part of their culture, and that he would have to stand behind his own organization with his name. So then we, of course, me not being that creative, decided to name our firm Clarke Capital. And knowing that I would have to put my name behind everything we did, for good or bad. But in this case, we go back to Steve Wynn and what he did. He becomes a billionaire by building this empire in gambling. We talked about the Wynn casinos in Las Vegas and then in Macau. Just this year, sexual misconduct allegations are filed and charged, and he loses his job after a 50-year career. At age 75, he's fired from his own firm. Can you imagine? After 50 years, much like this Bernie Madoff, he has to leave his own company in shame. So another example of someone who is the best until you're not, right? Thank you very much. You're getting this, right? You're getting the principle. I appreciate that. Okay, so let me just talk to you about these firms. Anybody recognize these logos? This Webvan, you can see that logo right there. Does anybody recognize these companies? These are companies that existed between 1995 and 2000. Okay, right here, you can kind of read, it's a little blurry. This was pets.com, Webvan, and then this last one, my favorite, is eToys. Each one of these organizations had, at the time of them going public, had about $1 billion market cap. Meaning that was unheard of. A company that was brand new, having $1 billion valuation was just something that was unfathomable for people to understand why a company that just took pets.com, branded it, didn't really have much of a product, had a little bit of dog food and a singing puppet, and they were worth $1 billion. Same thing for Webvan. They had this fleet of trucks, but they didn't really have a business model. And the same would be true with eToys. Well, they each shared a similar fate. They were all out of business within months of their IPOs. And shortly thereafter, of course, as you know, the dot-com bubble had burst in 2000 and 2001. Those that believed in the internet thought it was going to be this great thing. We're overvaluing businesses, but they didn't have the fundamentals. Let me liken that to something that you might know. Who knows the story of the Emperor's Clothes? Who knows? Who can tell us a little bit about that? What is it? Tell us your name.
Colton.
Okay, Colton.
Well, it was a tailor who convinced the emperor that he was the best tailor. He could make him an amazing outfit, like something nobody had ever seen. And so he builds this outfit, and
Did everybody hear Colton? Yeah.
So he builds this outfit, and it turns out it's nothing. And he says, like, it's kind of a thing like, well, what do you mean you can't see it? Like, you should be able to see it. I can't remember what the reason was. The emperor couldn't see it. So he goes out in public, and it turns out he's naked.
He is naked.
The emperor has no clothes.
And do you remember even
saying that comes from that.
Precisely? And do you remember even the people of this kingdom, okay,
Right.
of the empire, were there, and they were telling him how beautiful it was,
Right.
and how
So
wonderful he
people
looked.
were like, well, I get what?
Do you remember who told him that he wasn't wearing anything?
I can't remember now.
It was a child, Matthew. Exactly. It was a child that had to come forth. So somebody who wasn't playing any of these games. I think there's some similarities there as we look at the age of the unicorn and what's taking place. The age of cryptocurrencies and what might take place there. And there might be some reality there. But I think there's a bubble that we look at. It doesn't make sense to me when we give these multi-billion-dollar valuations to companies that are story and hype. And we saw that recently with WeWork. Anybody familiar with the WeWork story? We're pretty close to that. The new CEO that came from SoftBank is a friend of our firm's, Marcelo Clarke, who kind of stepped in as the white knight to help them out. But this is a company that had a deca-billion-dollar valuation, okay, based on losing hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars that they had raised, with a very, very similar model to a company that's out there with just a $1 or $2 billion valuation called Regis. Great firm, but it was hype and it was story. And when that doesn't really marry up to the long-term success of a business, that's when things fall apart. And I worry sometimes in this age of the unicorn, where we've got, well, I think the next slide will show us, some are saying that this is going to be in a correctionary environment, that there will be a unicorn on fire. Or put your helmets on, you unicorns, and get ready for what real business is. Today, there are almost 200 unicorn businesses in America. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say a unicorn business? What does that mean? Who wants to dare? Okay, so let me stop for a second. When you're talking about unicorns or businesses that are associated with that title, it's saying that they're startups that have $1 billion valuation or greater. In our backyard, so in Utah County where I live, there are several. Some have been very, very successful in their outcomes and exit. There's a company called Qualtrics that's 1 block away from my office, doing $200 million of sales, sold for 40 times that revenue number. Does that make sense to any of you? I am so happy that it happened to them, right? That's an $8 billion outcome, by the way, if you haven't done your math on that. That's an $8 billion takeout by SAP, and I'm so thrilled for them. It's such a great thing. But what we look at are fundamentals as an investor. Does a company fundamentally have strengths? Now, clearly the market spoke, and they do. But other businesses, one that had, and I won't mention names in this one, but one such company that had raised money at a $2 billion valuation as a startup. Does that make sense if you're doing $30 million of revenue? To have a $2 billion valuation, think of the multiple that someone would have to pay on something like that. Turns out, in a business like that, they had to do a 15-to-1 reverse split of the stock. That means that for every share that you had, it was worth 1/15 of what it was the day prior to its IPO. So that's the way to dilute. That's the way to what we say on Wall Street is take a haircut, and they did in a big way. So when you don't have the fundamentals to match that. So I want to tell you, our firm is focused on fundamentals of a business, profits, real revenues, and we'll then see if the market rewards us in a certain way. So you know what unicorns are now. You understand that they're very, very rare creatures, and some of them will get out alive, but others might not, okay, as we look at this. But many of those, the example I gave of Qualtrics is an example of it being the very best. Some will not be so lucky. Okay, these are some best-in-class companies. Who knows about the Enron story? Can you tell me?
So in California, they decided to make power private.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to make more money, and so what they would do is they call them brownouts. They would cut people's power.
Yes.
Because, these people are going to pay more money to get power because you need power, and people are dying in car accidents, all these things. And it came out that California students switched their power back to the the state instead of a private company because of what they've done.
Yeah, and laced with fraud inherent to this business. This was a $66 billion business. Well known, a stadium named after them, one of the best in breed companies, $66 billion to zero. Arthur Andersen, well, guess who did the books for Enron that said to the world that this was a solid company and that there was no fraud associated with it? This company right here. $9 billion in revenue, 85,000 employees going to zero. WorldCom, heard of this company before? This was the biggest of its day, $104 billion of market cap. That means their valuation. And they went to zero, okay? And the granddaddy of them all, $640 billion of assets under management to zero. Any guesses on what this one might be? Exactly, say that good and loud. This was Lehman Brothers right there. $640 billion, and what kicked off the Great Recession in 2007 and 2008. These companies were the best of breed, and they were the best until they're not. That's right. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so these are some of our investments, and we remind ourselves on a daily basis that we may have a best of breed company. This is a pet health company that we have, a consumer electronics company, that we are faced every single day with these same challenges that any other entrepreneur might face. Do we do the right thing? Are we doing the right thing for our customer? Are we making sound choices? Do we exhibit integrity in what we do? Are we ethical? Are we going above the legal standard, and are we ethical in what we do? And we ask ourselves that because we know that we're not immune to that either. Because we too are the best until you're not, right? Okay, we're getting there. Are you waking up? Are we getting there? Okay, it's lunchtime, I know, okay. But here's my warning to everybody, okay? So we can talk about these people that were best of class or best of breed, and my grandfather used to say this, that your integrity, like tires, doesn't all leave you in one blowout. That it is generally through a slow leak that you'll lose your integrity, that you will lose your ethics. So with that in mind, I want to talk to you just a little bit about entitleitis. You ever heard of that disease? Do you know what it is? It is truly a disease. We talk about it a lot in our firm, that people have this sense of entitlement. I talk to a lot of other university students where I feel like, they feel like the best thing they ever did was get into a very competitive university. Then the best thing beyond that was they got into a competitive business school. And the best thing they'll do beyond that is get, a job at a certain firm. But they feel entitled to that. They don't feel like, okay, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this, and I'm done. I want to be CEO next week. You know those kind of people? They feel like they deserve something. No, and I'm here to tell you, as we talk about in our own firm, that you deserve what you get. You will earn into what you get. It is through your scrappiness. It is through your own efforts. It's through what you do on a daily basis that you earn into that. Please, please, please do not subject yourself to entitleitis, this great disease of entitlement, okay? Second, so we talked about this a little bit, getting into a great university like SUU. You're here, it's a wonderful thing, but it can't be the best thing that you ever do. A lot of my, we talked about some of these fancy schools that I went to before. Hogwash, you guys. That might get me my first job, and for me as an entrepreneur, it's not gonna get me any job. It's what you do after that first job that's going to get you your next job or the promotion within that firm, okay? So just stay that scrappy you. And I think that's one of the great benefits of being here at SUU. It's this great university that is known for scrappy students that just get things done. A lot of you like me, I'm a small town farm kid raised in southeast Idaho. Okay, I went to this little college that nobody knew the name of it for part of my undergrad. I went to a place called Rick's College. You've probably never heard of that, okay? All my friends on the East Coast when I went to business school said, who's Rick? Whose college were you at? I had your dad played football at Rick's? Good football team. Yeah, but nobody knew what that was. Again, no entitlement. That getting into a good school, being here at this school, here at SUU, cannot be the best thing that ever happens to you. It's got to be beyond. This has got to be a stepping stone and a springboard for you in the rest of your life, for the accomplishments that you're to do. Some will say when they are learned, there's an old saying, when When they are learned, they think that they are wise. Many of these that you just knocked off their pedestal thought that they were so wise, right? Because they're from a fancy named university. Look what you did. So proud of your efforts in doing that, okay? Sorry, this number is wrong. But I want you to know this. So we talked a little bit about the schools. Sorry, I'll get this right someday. Forgive me for my error there. It is a number one, though. This is a big deal, though. Your name plus SUU is your most valuable asset. Did you notice when I was talking about Bernie Madoff, we talked about where he went to university, Hofstra. When we talked about Steve Wynn, remember where he went to university? Yeah, it was the University of Pennsylvania, another Ivy League school, and then had gotten into Yale Law School, best law school in the country. Okay, forever, isn't that in a movie? Forever, you are tied. Did you okay, you guys know this, all right. Forever, Sandlot. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. You guys are okay. Very, very good. Okay, you're Utah kids. Great. Forever, your name will be tied and associated with this university. Make this university proud. Make us proud. This is Utah. We're known to be hardworking people. We were people that were driven, most of us have come from other places and come to Utah. And then for generations have lived here and worked here and have built a great state. It is your most valuable asset. A lot of you here in these first couple rows I got to say hi to, right, as we met. Those that said their first name only, what did I ask you after that? I asked you your last name. I want you to say your first and your last name. That right there is your most valuable asset, okay? Use it. But know that just like these men that I've pointed out, you can work your whole life to build this great reputation, and it can be lost in a moment. So that asset is your most important asset, your reputation. And this includes honoring your own family. I want to just close this part of it, and then we'll go straight to questions. So please ask lots of questions. Just by talking about something here in our family. You see this, there's a family crest there on the left. Of course, labore et honore is in Latin, which means, of course, as I've pointed out here, labor and honor. Let me tell you what this means to me. So when I was a boy, I was 12 years old, my dad asked me to start working for him. I'd worked in potato fields, I'd moved pipe, I'd done a lot of different things, but my dad asked me to work for him in the summer, doing all kinds of odd jobs, painting, mowing lawns, working, and doing whatever was asked of me on a daily basis. I was to show up at a certain time, finish at a certain time. If I did that and did what was required of me and did a good job, an honorable job, he would take the words off this Clarke family crest. And in the memo section, that little left-hand corner of a check where it reads why you're getting the money, he would write, if I had done a good job, labor and honor. Now, had I not done a good job, had I been late, had I slept in, had I not finished what I was supposed to do, that little memo section would only read labor. Painful for a guy like me. Painful. And to me, it taught me the lesson that only labor coupled with honor would do for me. That is only what my life could be about, is laboring with honor. And that's my charge to you today. That you will all go out and have these wonderful careers and these excellent jobs, or even if you're on the football field, I see our football players back here with football shirts on and other athletes here that are doing things. As you labor, as you practice, as you do, that you will labor with honor. And that's what I believe my life's intended to do. I'm thankful to be here. Thanks so much for having me, and we'll go straight into questions. Okay? Oh, thanks. Okay, please, we've got about 15 minutes or so for questions. Please, if not, I'm just going to start calling on people to ask me a question, please.
So what kind of led you to start your own business, and can you just give us a rundown?
Yeah,
a little bit about
I felt like I gave you this big, long sort of bio, and I'm sorry I didn't want to bore you with those kinds of things. So I did my university studies and went to work for a publicly traded company. And while I was there, I learned very quickly that was not for me, to work for a large corporation. I had also worked for an organization that I really, really loved, but I had maybe the worst boss one could ever imagine. Like, there should be a TV show about how this boss treated other people. So I left these organizations thinking, I've got to go do this myself. And it was one of the greatest blessings in my life was to work for somebody that I didn't necessarily like or enjoy working with, because it drove me to what I now do. So immediately after that, I went and started my own company. I had sold pest control door to door. Anybody done that or sold anything door to door? Yeah, there are a few of you guys, right? So you don't know what you're gonna make the day that you go out to sell, right? You only eat what you kill, as they say, and that's what I learned to do. So I went and started a company, not selling pest control, as it were, earlier. I worked for a guy named Todd Peterson. Anybody know who that is? Owns a little company called Vivint, a multi-billion-dollar company called Vivint now. But they went out of business then. It was called CMC, Creative Marketing Concepts, that summer of '94 when I started working for him. And so I decided to do that, and he was kind enough to, as a favor, let me start my first business inside of his own office where he was running his renewed business. So that's sort of how I started out. And I thought it was very, very difficult to run a business where you had 4 months of revenue and 12 months of expenses. And I had a new class of competitors every year that went and started their own businesses. And so I decided that I would get involved in the internet. And so this was 2001. I started that business just 6 weeks after 9/11. Terrible time to start a business, by the way. There was no capital to be raised. Capital markets were completely dry, and nobody believed in the internet anymore. Remember these, pets.com and these others that I showed you? But it turns out it cleared out the competitive landscape and allowed us to see some early success in that business. And my wife, whom I had married, she was my fiance when we started this, and I promised her that we would be cash flow positive by the time we had a baby. And that month, May of 2003, we were cash flow positive right before. So, thank you. That's what happened. That was ClearLink, and then we sold that in 2011. Thought we were going to sell in 2008, hired a new CEO to run the business so we wouldn't have golden handcuffs when I left the business. But we didn't sell as the world fell apart. And we had 2 years, which was a great blessing to us because the business grew 3 to 4-fold in that period of time. But I was without a job, so I set up an office in New York and figured out what I would do at the next stage of my life. And that was what I do now, investing in other businesses. So long answer to a very short question, but thanks for the question. Okay, other questions, please, right over here. Tell us your name.
I'm Mitchell.
Mitchell?
Zufeld?
Thanks, yeah. Mitchell. Appreciate
Was
it.
going to Harvard worth it?
In what sense? Worth it? Worth like the tuition dollars?
Tuition, worth probably all the effort that it takes to keep up.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, right? It was the best educational experience of my life, even far better than what I did at Oxford beyond that. So it was the right time for me. It was very, very expensive, not just from a tuition standpoint. I left my business, was doing an executive program, and had to then option in and add equity to my fellow employees so that they felt like they were owners in the business. So that part was really, really expensive. Tuition was cheap compared to that, but yeah, worth it in every way. Education, people, there's this great educational debate. Is it worth it? Firm believer in the value of education. Remember a lot of what I learned, but the most important thing that I did throughout my education was build these relationships. These people that are around you are your future business partners, friends, colleagues, employees, and that's what it's in so many ways, the ancillary benefit of education. So yes, thanks so much. Over here, please. Tell me your name.
Colton.
Thanks, Colton. All right.
What's kind of the process of getting somebody to invest in a company?
Okay, that's a great question. Did everybody hear that? What's the process of getting someone to invest in your business? Now, that speaks to being a salesman, right? And I think it's probably one of the most overlooked talents or skills that one must have to be a successful entrepreneur or CEO or do anything in an organization. You've got to be able to, 1, sell yourself, 2, sell what this business idea is. And so that's really what you're doing. And it is a shots on goal approach. You're going to talk to 100, maybe even 1,000 people before you get one person to invest. And if you think about the best companies that are out there, A lot of times that's the story. That's the story that you might hear from, Jeff Bezos. It's a story that you might hear from even a Steve Jobs. But Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs had to pitch and pitch and pitch, and they were great salesmen in doing that. And they were able to do that and get a market to believe that someday a little company called upstart, called Amazon, might be one of the largest businesses in the world. And they've been able to then execute. So you've got to be able to sell, and then you've got to be able to execute. Prove that story marries what you're able to do. Other questions? Yeah.
I'm Lulu Reese.
Hi, thanks. You've got it. We're in the pattern. Great.
So my question is, how did you separate your life, your personal life, your family life, and your work life now and then?
I'm not good at that. Let me just be candid with you all. The question is, how did I separate my work life then versus now? Is that a fair depiction? Okay, so I'm answering this correctly. I don't see my life that way. It all kind of falls in the same bucket for me. My kids all either work at our firm or are there talking about, they're welcome to and have come to about any kind of business meeting that I've ever had. It is all kind of one and the same for us. Some people like to compartmentalize their lives into, your business and family life, and I can't do that. It's all sort of the same, and it's tricky to balance, right? Are you asking me a balance question?
Kind of. Like, how do you relax? How's your downtime? What do you do to be able to soothe your life?
And maybe that's the difference between you and I and some other people. This is relaxing for me. So I enjoy this. And we're on 24/7. This is what we like to do. Will I turn on the TV from time to time? Sure. Will we watch a game together? But what we're doing is we're usually kind of marrying some parts and pieces into that I'll have business colleagues around all the time. This is our social outlet. And probably more accurately stated, that's the way we try to do good in our businesses. Whether it's here at SUU today or in our business, we're just trying to do good in whatever we're doing. So that's how we try to keep it all in the same bucket. I know that's probably not a great answer, but that's about where we are. One more question, and then we'll go to this side. Colton, you're back. Back for more. I didn't give you enough, huh?
So when you invest into a company,
yeah.
What's like kind of the owning percentage ratio? Like how much of the company do you own? How much do they own?
Yeah.
Like, or do you own the whole company?
Yeah, quick answer is it depends. We have some of those companies that I listed there. We've owned the entire company. Contour, which was a camera company, we were the largest investor into the fund that invested in that business. The company went out of business, so we bought it out of receivership and owned 100% of it. Turned it around, built an intellectual property strategy behind it, and then sold that. We own 10% of that business today. So it depends. For example, our publicly traded company today, we once owned 30% plus of that business. Today, as a publicly traded company, we're, the largest individual stakeholder, and you can all look up how many shares we hold. It's all public information, but it depends. Because it's our own money, we can have flexibility to our thesis. So it just depends on who you're investing with or looking for. Please, over here. This is our winner, right? Yes. Yeah, all right.
Hi, thank you for being here and for the presentation. My question is, what are some of the challenges Clarke Capital Partners is facing right now?
So I'll give you an example. I think we've got some companies in our portfolio that perform very, very well. They sell well, they have great profits, they're on a wonderful trajectory. You can't control certain things. We can only control what we can control. We can't control the perception in public markets. So that's a challenge for us when we believe a company should probably be worth $2 billion and it's trading at sub $1 billion. Well, that's meaningful money in our pockets. But we have to kind of shut off the noise of public markets and things like that and just believe in pure execution and how that serves the company long term. So we are always faced with the short term, what is the value today versus doing what's right for the business in the long term. That's always going to be a challenge for us and a challenge for any of you that work in capital markets. So that's probably one of the greater challenges we see is just being disciplined enough to know that we're doing what's right for the business long term, despite what a public market perception might be.
And so I had another question because we went to Chicago last week and we
Yeah, just in Chicago last week, huh?
We met with someone from private equity.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, because I know it depends on the ownership. When you like investing into one company, do you let them like manage the asset like when you investing to them, or like do you supervise everything when you decide to invest?
Do we provide everything?
Yeah.
Let me make sure I understand the question. So when we invest, we let them sort of run that as they would see fit. Yeah, it's a good question. Some might not. Some investors might not. We're betting on horses as much as we are betting on the race. We're betting on these solid entrepreneurs with a defensible thesis that are doing X amount in revenue already and then can build this to $1 billion business or greater. We won't invest unless we believe a business can be at least worth $1 billion or greater. You know, there are only so many hours in a day, and you know, it takes us the same amount of time to do a small investment as it does a big investment. So that's how we move the needles, by doing larger investments. But I will just commenting back on your other question about the challenges, and then I'll go to somebody else. The real problems in business are always people problems. It's never a market problem. It's the most challenging part of any business that you'll run is with the people there. It's the best part as well, working with wonderful people. But when you're not working with wonderful people say that life is short. Life suddenly becomes very long when you're working with the wrong people. But they are always the people problems that are the most challenging, for sure. Back to this side. Yes, please.
My name's Clarke.
Thanks, Kyle. With an E or no E?
With an E.
Oh, come on. We're cousins. All right.
Anyways, what would you consider your greatest accomplishment up to this point?
Ryan. There she is. You're looking at her. Thank you. Thanks. Did you mean business accomplishment? Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Other questions? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Austin Dastrup.
Hi, Austin. How are you?
What was your biggest eureka moment? What was like your aha moment in business?
Okay, so that's a good question. I grew up with nothing. I was a have-not that happened to grow up amongst haves. I was mentioning this to Chair Christensen on the way down, that I had an aunt that had built this great big global business that happened to be headquartered in our little town in Idaho. I watched her, and then I had later in my life, I had a brother-in-law who built his first $1 billion business, and now he's the largest stakeholder and was the CEO of what is the largest business in the state of Utah, about a $15 billion company. So again, I was a nobody, but I watched these guys, and the common thread between both this brother-in-law and this aunt and uncle of mine that I'd watched was they came from nothing too. And that I could do this. And so that's my message to you as well here at SU. You could do this. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of hard work, grit, all these things that we're talking about. But you could do it. That's what's great about America. Equal opportunity for us, not equal work ethic among us. And if this were easy, what I do and what those entrepreneurs who are amongst us do, everybody would be doing it. Right? But it's not easy. It's about as challenging a thing as there is. And families live through it. And you take it home. There's not a balance. There's not I leave it at the office, because I take it home. And it's part of what we do, and it's the fabric of what our life is about. Other questions on this side? We've just got time for about 2 more questions.
I'm Jonathan Klein.
Hey, Jonathan.
My question is, in terms of like measuring like market patterns and stuff like that, what is your strategy? And also, like, what do you think about like the future of like quantifying or quants in general? So
I spent a lot of time looking at patterns and anti-patterns when I was doing my dissertation. You'll say this is silly and try coming from me, but most of what we do, and as I look at our business and the best business people that I know, we look at all the data and we'll read all the data, but the best decisions that I've ever made are these gut-filled decisions. It seems like I didn't look at the data at all, because you generally wouldn't choose to build a technology business when the dot-com bubble had burst. You wouldn't choose to build a business when the capital markets are completely dry and you can't raise any money. But that felt right. And so, listen, the answer to that one for me is that you should follow your gut more than you think. And it's this pattern recognition. As much as you see it in markets, recognize the pattern in yourself. You know, you'll do things that are right and just keep doing things that are right. And that pattern just comes, those neural pathways come. And so market's fickle. Markets, who knows, right? I wish there were ways that I could predict the market, but that's why we work in areas where we can control at least what our operators do rather than what capital markets are going to do. And so we live by it, but we die by it, and it sometimes drives us crazy in capital markets as well. But follow your gut is what I'm really trying to say as you look at patterns that way. So sorry, your professors are going to kill me because I said that, but following your gut is a great part of what we do as entrepreneurs. So yeah. Last question.
Okay. I'm Mason Orton. You mentioned that you had a humble upbringing.
Sure.
And you feel like maybe that has contributed to some of your success. So knowing like now, I imagine your kids have more than you did at their age. How do you build resiliency in your kids?
Yeah, I don't know. We're sure trying to figure it out right now. Got any ideas, share them with me. But I will tell you one thing in our family that we focus on is creating scarcity, perhaps where there is none. So controlled opportunities where, you know, our kids aren't given a whole lot, if that makes sense, that they know, Ryan, do you have to work for things? And just stand up for a second. So when mom and dad blast off, okay, you know what that means when we blast off? That means when we die, okay? That's code for when mom and dad die. What do you get? What do you get from mom and dad? Did you hear that? Nothing. That she's not going to count on that. Thanks, that's all, Ryan. Appreciate that. Good answer. That's the right answer. The only answer. Nothing. That's what we do, is that this is not a ride for these guys. I would not want to cheat them out of what their future is. I'll tell you what, I always thought that each one of my children would somehow be involved with our firm, that they would all have a role to do, that they would come and run it someday. And I thought about that. I thought, you know, maybe that's a death sentence for a kid, creating their destiny, that they don't have any choice in the matter. So if they want to do that, there's certainly an opportunity, but are they going to go to, you know, a great SUU and get an undergrad and a great, you know, graduate school to learn and then spend time out on the street and pay their dues? Yeah, they're going to do those things if they want to be a part of this, but they pay their dues, and I hope we practice what we preach. So maybe, I think we've got time for one more, and then we'll finish up. Matthew, please. This is Chair Christensen's nephew right here, so I got to meet Matthew beforehand. So.
What were some of the most important soft skills that you learned in college, whether it was time management or just the ability to get things done?
Yeah, those are all really important. I think one thing that was really important for me, if you're really talking about, maybe this is the softest of the soft skills, is, you know, people will talk about how we interact with people, my wife and I, and we happen to care. I think that is really what, you know, might separate us in what we do. Both we care at work, we care in our community, we care with our family. You'd be amazed at what just that one act of caring can do in your life. You care about making something happen, and you'll will it to be so. And I think that's a great characteristic to carry into one's life. And I hope that we are able to do that with our firm, in our community, and here in the state of Utah. I'm so grateful to be here with you today at SUU. What a great place to gain an education, and you're a great class. So thank you very, very much. Thanks.